A few decades ago, a single income could buy a house, support a family, pay for college, and still leave enough money for retirement savings. Today, millions of Americans are working full-time jobs and still struggling just to afford rent, groceries, healthcare, and basic bills. The middle class was once the backbone of the American economy, but now many people feel like they're slowly falling behind no matter how hard they work. So, what happened? Why does it suddenly feel impossible to achieve the same financial stability previous generations had? Today, we're breaking down the real reasons America's middle class is disappearing and why so many families feel financially trapped. Welcome back to The Dollar Pilot. For most of modern American history, the middle class represented financial stability. You didn't need to be rich to live comfortably. A steady job, affordable housing, and consistent wage growth allowed millions of Americans to slowly build wealth over time. But over the last few decades, that financial balance has started breaking apart. Today, many Americans feel like the economy is only working for two groups of people: the very wealthy and those barely surviving paycheck to paycheck. Meanwhile, the middle class keeps shrinking. One of the biggest reasons is the rising cost of living. Housing prices across the United States have exploded compared to incomes. In many cities, home prices increased dramatically while wages failed to keep pace. Mortgage rates also surged higher, making homeownership even harder for younger Americans. For previous generations, buying a home in your 20s or 30s was relatively achievable. Today, millions of Americans are delaying homeownership because monthly payments became unaffordable. Rent prices have also climbed sharply. In some areas, families now spend 40% or more of their income just on housing alone. And once housing consumes that much income, saving money becomes extremely difficult. But housing is only one piece of the puzzle. Healthcare costs in America continue rising faster than inflation in many cases. Insurance premiums, medical bills, prescription costs, and emergency healthcare expenses create enormous financial pressure for middle-class families. At the same time, higher education became significantly more expensive. Millions of Americans entered adulthood carrying large student loan balances before they even began building wealth. Many young workers are trying to pay rent, buy groceries, afford transportation, and manage debt all at the same time. Then there's inflation. Over the last several years, Americans watched grocery prices, utility bills, gas prices, and everyday essentials become dramatically more expensive. Even people receiving salary increases often feel poorer because their purchasing power keeps shrinking. And this creates an important reality many people are now noticing. Working harder no longer guarantees financial progress the way it once did. Another major factor hurting the middle class is wage stagnation. While productivity and corporate profits increased significantly over time, many workers did not see income growth match the rising costs of living. In other words, the economy became more expensive, faster than many middle-class wages could realistically keep up. Meanwhile, asset prices continued rising. Stocks, real estate, and investments grew enormously over the past decades. People who already owned assets benefited massively, but people without investments or property often struggled to catch up. This is one reason wealth inequality became such a major issue in America. The financial gap between asset owners and average workers widened significantly. And technology is also changing the economy rapidly. Automation, artificial intelligence, and globalization transformed industries across the country. Some jobs disappeared entirely, while others became unstable or highly competitive. Many workers now feel constant pressure to stay employable in a fast-changing economy. The rise of the gig economy added another layer of uncertainty. Instead of stable, long-term careers with pensions and benefits, many Americans now rely on contract work, side hustles, or multiple income streams just to maintain financial stability. And psychologically, this creates exhaustion. People feel like they can never fully relax financially because one emergency expense could suddenly create debt or financial panic. At the same time, social media constantly promotes unrealistic lifestyles. Americans are surrounded by images of luxury vacations, expensive homes, designer products, and financial success, even while many households quietly struggle behind the scenes. This creates additional pressure to spend money people don't actually have. Credit card debt across America continues climbing, partly because many families are trying to maintain lifestyles during a period of rising living costs and economic uncertainty. Now, does this mean the American dream is completely dead? Not necessarily. But it does mean the rules changed. Today, financial survival often requires more than simply working a traditional job. Financial literacy became incredibly important. Understanding investing, budgeting, debt management, emergency savings, retirement planning, and long-term asset building now matters more than ever before. This is why many financial experts emphasize investing early and consistently through strategies like dollar-cost averaging into low-cost index funds. Historically, owning assets has remained one of the strongest ways to build long-term wealth and protect purchasing power against inflation. Because the reality is this: the modern economy increasingly rewards ownership over labor alone. People who own businesses, investments, real estate, or appreciating assets often benefit far more during economic growth than people relying entirely on wages. And unfortunately, many Americans were never properly taught these financial concepts. Schools often teach people how to work for money, but not how to make money work for them. That's why so many middle-class families feel financially stuck even while working incredibly hard. The system itself became more expensive, more competitive, and more asset-driven than previous generations experienced. At the end of the day, the middle class isn't disappearing because Americans suddenly became lazy. Many people are working harder than ever before. The real issue is that the cost of stability rose faster than financial opportunity for millions of households. And unless incomes, housing affordability, inflation, and financial education improve, the pressure on the American middle class may continue growing for years to come. Because right now, for many families, surviving financially no longer feels like building wealth. It simply feels like trying not to fall behind.